Hello, my name is Sarah Fite. I work as the Volunteer and Adult Programs Coordinator at the University of Nebraska State Museum. Today's presentation will be on museum intellectual property, what it is and why it matters, and how we can begin to create a policy of intellectual property management for the State Museum. Today we're going to cover what is intellectual property, why is it important? We'll review 4 types of intellectual property. We'll discuss the stakeholders in UNSM's IP, and we'll consider where we fit in. And we'll go over a draft of first steps in leading an intellectual property audit at the museum. So what is intellectual property? Intellectual property can be described as valuable products of human intellect. More specifically, copyright. Under the 1976 copyright law, authors are granted the right to make reproductions or copies of their works, the right to distribute their work to the public, the right to create new work based on their prior work, sometimes called derivative work, and the right to perform or display their work in public. Trademarks. Copyright does not protect names, titles, or short phrases. These must be trademarked. Trademarks can offer protection for phrases, logos, or symbols that distinguish a product or service. So here we see our museum logo. This is an example of something that we could choose to trademark. Patents. Out of the 4 different IP areas, I would say that patents have the least overlap with what we do here in the museum. Patents offer protection for an invention for commercial use. Patents protect the ideas of an invention. However, if you're a faculty member doing research on campus at UNL, patents may provide a very important protection for you and your work, particularly if you decide to bring your research to industry. Trade secrets. In museums, trade secrets can be thought of in several ways. Perhaps it's technology relating to collection management methods or particular databases that we develop in-house, conservation techniques we might use on our objects and specimens, or within development, it could be private donor or fundraising techniques that the museum acquires. As leaders in the knowledge-based economy, cultural institutions are intrinsically involved in the creation and distribution of IP assets. Cultural institutions routinely create and use IP as part of every functional aspect of their daily activities. I would encourage all of us, no matter what department we hold ourselves within, to think about what IP assets we produce, whether we're in collections management, human resources, fundraising, retail sales, curatorial, or research, as well as education. Remember, we can create and produce IP content as part of UNSM, but we can also use the IP of others. So are museums covered under fair use? Fair use is a set of guidelines designed to allow for the sharing of information. However, it is not a black and white interpretation. It's possible for an individual or an institution to still be sued even if we claim fair use. This is of particular importance to us as an education institution. Oftentimes, people are under the misconception that if we're using copyrighted material, but it's for educational purposes, it will automatically be considered fair use. This is not necessarily correct. We must be aware if we're using someone else's work and if that work is copyrighted. And then we must think carefully about the standards for fair use to decide if we truly are using the work under the guidelines of fair use. Whenever possible, it's always best to ask permission before using another person or institution's work. The College Art Association offers guidelines for fair use justification for museums. These include, when copyrighted works are used in connection with exhibitions, the use should be justifiable by the exhibition's objective. The amount of a work used in museum publications and the size and resolution of published reproductions should be appropriate to the curatorial or educational purpose. Images made available online should be suitable in size for full screen projection or display on a personal computer or mobile device, but generally not larger. Downloading of online images should not be facilitated unless a special justification is present. Documentation of museum collections should honor institutional 13 policies designed to protect non-copyright interests of third parties, including the privacy of individuals and the cultural sensitivities of communities. This is particularly important for us when we consider our anthropology collections. So what is an IP audit? An IP audit is a consistent, continuous process of self-evaluation. Goals include to assess the IP assets for which an institution is responsible, help manage those assets to further the institution's mission and values, and to implement strategies to minimize the risk associated with the use of those assets. This is important because it can lead to several meaningful results, including helping to determine what resources the museum has and where they've come from, helps us to monitor that third-party IP usage is legal and consistent with museum policy, that we are not just relying under a blanket fair use standard, helps us to avoid IP infringement, and creates a process for tracking our own museum IP that we create. So below are outlines of steps that we can take as a staff to try to help us create an IP policy for UNSM. It will begin with departmental review of our current IP assets. Again, I would encourage all of us, no matter what our department, to take part in this. So whether we're curatorial, education, museum store, marketing, or development, we all have a role in looking at what IP assets we may be using or have developed ourselves. Determine the status of our current IP assets. And then departments can present their recommendations for protection at our next staff and curatorial meeting. From there, we'll have a core group of individuals and staff members, probably from the departments with the most IP assets that need to be protected, formed together to write our museum's collection IP guidelines. Once a draft has been completed, we could submit for review by our director and then for final approval from UNL. I hope this presentation has helped you begin to think about the way you use intellectual property in your work here at USM, and if you've created any that we should consider copywriting. Thank you.